My name is Angela Blackwood. To the outside world, I was nothing but an ordinary woman. Quiet, fragile, almost invisible. But what they never realized was that everything they saw was just a mask. A fragile illusion hiding the storm that had been building inside me for years. Because if they knew the truth, their entire world would shatter. Since I was a child, I had always felt out of place, as if the life I was living had been forced onto me. A home that never felt like mine, a future carved by someone else's hands, boundaries I never agreed to. At night, I woke from the same recurring nightmares. Screams echoing in the dark, muffled voices arguing in a locked room, and the silhouettes of strange men whose faces I could never fully see. My mother always brushed it off. "Just dreams, Angela," she whispered as she tucked me in. But my father, he said nothing. His silence screamed louder than anything else. Deep down, I knew. They weren't dreams. For years, the same question haunted me. Why me? I never got the answer. Not until I turned 25. By then, I was still living under my parents' roof, though I no longer felt like their daughter. More like a stranger forced into a role she never auditioned for. At family dinners, they smiled and laughed, but I could see it in their eyes. The hollow gleam, the way my mother always avoided my gaze, the way my father sat in silence like a man carrying a coffin on his shoulders. One night, in the old cellar, I found something that changed everything. A box. Dust-covered. Forgotten. Or so I thought. The lock was broken, as if someone had once tried to hide what was inside, but time, or guilt, had forced it open. Inside, I found my birth certificate. But there was a problem. It didn't say Angela Blackwood. The dates didn't match. The name wasn't mine. My chest tightened. My hands shook as I held the papers, unable to breathe. In that moment, my entire existence collapsed into a single terrifying thought. Everything I believed about myself was a lie. Beneath the documents were old photographs. Faded. Black and white. One picture showed a woman clutching a crying baby, tears streaming down her shadowed face. I couldn't see her clearly, but her despair bled through the image. On the back, in messy handwriting, a chilling message. She must never know. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I wasn't supposed to know who I really was. But why? That night, for the first time in my life, fear gave birth to anger. If they weren't going to tell me the truth, I would uncover it myself. No matter the cost. Because I wasn't just the secret they created. I was the nightmare waiting to rise. I couldn't sleep that night. The box lay open on my bed, its contents scattered like broken pieces of my identity. Every time I closed my eyes, the woman in the photograph stared back at me. Her arms wrapped tightly around that crying baby, her grief frozen in time. Was that woman my real mother? And if so, who were the people I called Mom and Dad? The thought gnawed at me until my chest felt like it was caving in. I needed answers. I crept out of bed and returned to the cellar, hoping I'd missed something. The air was damp, carrying the faint smell of mold and old wood. The single light bulb flickered, casting long shadows on the walls. I crouched near the dusty shelf where I'd found the box. My fingers brushed against the wood searching. And then I felt it, a loose plank. Heart pounding, I pried it open. Inside was a hidden compartment, small but carefully carved. And there, wrapped in old cloth, I discovered more documents. Letters, medical forms, even a newspaper clipping. My hands trembled as I unfolded them. The letters were addressed to Dr. H. Whitmore, a name I didn't recognize. The words were clinical, detached, yet horrifying. The subject responds well to conditioning. However, emotional detachment is still incomplete. Further sessions are advised. Subject? Conditioning? Were they talking about me? My stomach twisted, bile rising in my throat. I forced myself to keep reading. The medical forms carried my birthday, or at least, the birthday I thought was mine. But in one document, the date was crossed out and replaced. It was altered. Falsified. Then I found the newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Local woman missing, newborn daughter feared taken." My vision blurred. The picture below the headline was the same woman from the photograph. The crying baby in her arms. It had to be me. I stumbled backward, clutching the paper to my chest. My breaths came shallow, rapid. My parents, no, the people who raised me, hadn't just lied. They had stolen me. Footsteps. I froze. Someone else was in the cellar. The sound was faint at first, then sharper, measured, deliberate, descending the stairs. I shoved the papers back into the compartment and forced the plank shut. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I thought it might give me away. Angela. My mother's voice floated down, soft yet strained. What are you doing down there at this hour? For a moment, I couldn't answer. My throat was too tight. I pressed my back against the wall, clutching the edge of the shelf like a lifeline. When I finally spoke, my voice was steady, too steady. I couldn't sleep. I just needed some air. There was silence. Then, the sound of her hand gripping the banister. I thought she was going to come all the way down, but instead she stopped halfway. Go back to bed, she said. It's late. Her voice wasn't gentle. It was sharp, commanding. And for the first time, I noticed something I had never allowed myself to see before, the cold calculation in her tone. I waited until her footsteps retreated, until the cellar door clicked shut. Only then did I let out the breath I'd been holding. My legs shook beneath me, but my mind was clear. They were hiding something far darker than I'd ever imagined. And now, I wasn't just their daughter. I was their biggest threat. The next morning, I couldn't look at my parents the same way. When my mother placed a plate of eggs in front of me, her smile seemed rehearsed. Her eyes scanning me, weighing me, as if she could read my thoughts. My father sat at the table, his newspaper held high, but I noticed the way his fingers drummed against the wood. It wasn't casual. It was nervous. They knew I was getting closer. I forced myself to eat, to smile, to nod when they spoke. I had to pretend. Pretend I was still the obedient daughter they thought they'd created. But inside, I was unraveling. Every word they said felt like another lie. As soon as I could, I slipped away to my room. I pulled out my phone and typed Dr. H. Whitmore into the search bar. The name wasn't common, but there were still too many results. Hospitals, research papers, even a psychology textbook from decades ago. I scrolled until one article stopped me cold. Dr. Harold Whitmore, controversial child development specialist, retires after ethics violations. My pulse quickened as I opened it. The article described experiments, whispers of illegal adoptions, and rumors of children taken from their families to be raised under controlled environments. The words conditioning and emotional detachment appeared again, just like in the letters I'd found. And then, a name buried in the article, one of his longtime associates, Richard Calloway, defended Whitmore's work. Richard. My father's name was Richard. My vision swam. It couldn't be a coincidence. My father hadn't just known this doctor. He had been part of it. I slammed the laptop shut, fear clawing at my chest. Suddenly, I wasn't safe in my own home. That night, I waited until the house was quiet, then crept back to the cellar. I needed more proof. The hidden compartment still held the documents I'd shoved inside. I pulled them out, searching for anything I'd missed. And there it was, an envelope I hadn't opened before. Inside was a black and white photograph. A hospital room. Dr. Whitmore stood in a white coat, his hand on the shoulder of a man half-turned toward the camera. My father. He looked younger, but his eyes were unmistakable. Cold. Determined. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the photo. My parents hadn't stumbled into this life. They had chosen it. They had chosen me. Or rather, they had taken me. As I stared at the photo, I noticed something else. In the background, lying in a hospital crib, was a baby. The tag tied to the crib read, Baby A. Baby Angela. Me. I couldn't breathe. The wooden stairs above creaked. Someone was awake. I shoved the photo back into the envelope and stuffed it under my shirt just as the cellar door opened. This time, it wasn't my mother. It was my father. His figure filled the doorway, broad shoulders blocking the light. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it that made my stomach turn. Angela, he said. Why are you always down here? I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. I couldn't sleep. His eyes narrowed. For a long, terrifying moment, he just stood there watching me. Then he nodded once. "Go upstairs. Now." I obeyed. But I could feel his gaze burning into my back as I climbed the stairs. That night, lying in bed with the photo pressed to my chest, I made myself a promise. I was done pretending. If they thought they could control me, they were wrong. I wasn't their subject anymore. I was their reckoning. Sleep never came that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the photograph again. My father's hand on Whitmore's shoulder, the crib labeled Baby A. I couldn't erase the image. It was proof, undeniable and horrifying. I wasn't theirs by choice. I was theirs by design. The next morning, I walked through the house as if it were a prison. My mother hummed softly as she folded laundry, but her every glance toward me was sharp, assessing. My father had already left for work, though I was beginning to wonder if that word meant what he claimed it did. I needed answers, but I couldn't risk looking for them here. I grabbed my jacket and left the house, telling my mother I was going for a walk. The library was my sanctuary. Quiet, unassuming. No one ever asked questions there. I found a secluded corner, pulled out my laptop, and began digging deeper into Dr. Harold Whitmore's past. Most official records had been scrubbed, but I found a handful of archived newspaper clippings. Words like ethics breach, unauthorized human trials, and children missing from hospitals bled through the articles. But one headline made my blood run cold. Former Whitmore subject speaks out, "We were experiments, not children." The article was dated only 2 years ago. The interviewee had refused to give their real name, identifying only as S. They claimed Whitmore and his associates had raised children under controlled conditions, studying how they bonded, or failed to bond, with the adults posing as their parents. And then I saw it. At the bottom of the article was a blurred photo of the anonymous whistleblower. The face was hidden, but the outline was sharp enough to recognize a girl, maybe a little older than me. Another one. I wasn't the only one. My hands trembled as I copied the contact email listed for anonymous tips. I had to find this person. If anyone could tell me the truth, it was them. But before I could draft the message, I felt it. That sensation. The distinct, crawling awareness that someone was watching me. I looked up. Across the library, near the history section, stood a young man, dark hoodie, unreadable expression. He wasn't reading. He wasn't browsing. He was staring directly at me. Our eyes met, and instead of looking away, he tilted his head, like he was waiting for me to understand something. I quickly shoved my laptop into my bag and left the library. But when I stepped outside, the cold air hitting my face, I froze. He was already there, leaning casually against a lamppost, as though he'd been waiting. I turned, ready to run, but his voice cut through the silence. "Angela." My blood turned to ice. He knew my name. "Stay away from me," I hissed, clutching my bag tighter. "I can't," he said softly, taking a careful step closer. "You don't know me yet, but I know you. I've been where you are. You're not alone." I shook my head, panic rising. "What are you talking about?" He reached into his pocket slowly, pulling out a small folded piece of paper. He extended it toward me, his gaze steady. "They're lying to you," he whispered. "You were never their daughter. And Whitmore, he's not done with you." The paper trembled in his hand, but I didn't take it. I couldn't move. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure he could hear it. "Who are you?" I finally managed to ask. His lips curved into the faintest, saddest smile. "Someone who escaped." Before I could press him further, he turned and disappeared into the crowd, leaving me standing there with nothing but questions. And the terrifying certainty that my nightmare was only beginning. That I spent the rest of the evening pacing my small apartment, the folded paper burning a hole in my thoughts. Who was that stranger? How could he know everything? And most importantly, what was written on that paper? I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying his words, "You were never their daughter. And Whitmore, he's not done with you." My stomach twisted with a mix of fear and fury. I had spent my entire life believing I was loved, cared for, part of a family. And now it felt like every moment had been a lie meticulously crafted by someone who wanted me to stay obedient, vulnerable, and unsuspecting. I couldn't ignore it. I had to find that paper. The next morning, I returned to the library, searching for any clue of the stranger. Hours passed, and he never appeared. But my desperation drove me to the hidden corners of the library, where old newspapers, microfilms, and dust-covered archives hid secrets. Finally, tucked behind a stack of medical journals, I found a small envelope, my name scrawled in careful, familiar handwriting. Inside, a single sheet of paper. Whitmore experimented with children under the guise of adoption. They monitor every move of the family who raises them. You are the key to exposing them. But they will come for you if they suspect you know. The letter continued. Meet me tonight at the abandoned greenhouse on 9th Street. Alone. If you're brave enough to learn the truth, come. I swallowed hard, my hands shaking. Every rational thought screamed at me to ignore it, to run home and pretend none of this ever happened. But a stronger, darker part of me, the part that had always suspected, always felt trapped, whispered, I had to know the truth no matter the cost. Night fell, cold and heavy, as I approached the greenhouse. Its shattered windows reflected the pale moonlight, and the rusty metal door creaked ominously as I pushed it open. Inside, the stranger waited. Not in the shadows this time, but fully visible. And behind him, chains of photographs hung like a grotesque gallery. Children, all smiling in different homes, different families, each labeled with cryptic codes, dates, and names. My heart pounded. Each face felt familiar. Who are they? I asked, voice trembling. They were like me, he said, stepping closer. And you might be the only one left who can stop Whitmore before he does this again. I glanced at the photographs, then back at him. Why me? Because you have something they never anticipated. You were curious. You didn't just obey. You questioned. And questioning makes you dangerous to them. My mind reeled. All my life had been a lie. My family, my home, my identity. It was all a carefully constructed experiment. And now, I was at the center of it. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed outside the greenhouse. My pulse skyrocketed. They know you're here, the stranger whispered urgently. We have to move now. Before I could protest, he handed me a small flash drive. Everything you need to expose Whitmore is here. But once you start this, there's no turning back. Are you ready, Angela? I clutched the flash drive like it was a lifeline. My entire life, I had been lied to, manipulated, and watched. Now, for the first time, I had a chance to take control, to turn the tables. Yes, I said, voice firm despite the fear clawing at me. I'm ready. The stranger nodded, and together we slipped into the night, shadows swallowing us as we vanished into the labyrinth of streets. The city felt colder that night, as if it knew what was coming. Clutching the flash drive, I followed the stranger through alleys and backstreets, the shadows bending and twisting around us. Every step made my heart pound harder, every distant siren a reminder that danger was real. I had crossed the point of no return. Finally, we arrived at a hidden office tucked beneath an abandoned building. Inside, multiple screens displayed surveillance footage, children in unknown homes, Whitmore overseeing every move, and some of the very faces I had seen in the greenhouse photographs. My stomach churned, rage and sorrow mingling into a bitter storm. You have everything you need here, the stranger said, pointing to the screens and a small laptop connected to the flash drive. But there's one thing you must understand, Whitmore is not just powerful, he's dangerous. He will come for you, and he won't hesitate to destroy anyone in his path. Are you prepared to face him? I inhaled deeply, thinking of all the years I had been lied to, of every manipulation, every shadow of fear cast over my life. I've waited for this moment my entire life, I said. I'm ready. Hours passed as we carefully copied files, decrypting secret codes and compiling evidence that would expose Whitmore's empire of lies. Each document revealed horrors that made my blood run cold: false identities, illegal adoptions, psychological experiments on children. The web was larger than I had imagined, and at the center of it all was Whitmore, the man who had turned my life into a cage. Then, as we prepared to leave, the door slammed open. Whitmore himself stepped in, flanked by men in black suits, eyes cold and unyielding. My heart nearly stopped, but I squared my shoulders. "Angela," he said, voice calm but filled with menace. "You shouldn't have come here. This isn't your world." "No," I said, holding up the flash drive. "It's the world you've stolen from all of us. And now, everyone will know the truth." Whitmore's men advanced, but the stranger stepped in, pulling out a hidden device that triggered an alarm and automated lockdown of the building. Cameras flashed, and the screens displayed the message: "All files have been uploaded to the authorities. Whitmore's operations are exposed." Whitmore's face turned pale as he realized his empire was crumbling. He lunged, but I had anticipated him. A small vial from the stranger's kit, something I hadn't even considered using, found its way into his hands before he could act. He froze, trapped by his own fear. "You thought you could control me," I said, stepping forward, every ounce of anger and betrayal fueling me. "But control ends here." With the authorities already receiving the files and Whitmore's men hesitating, I knew the final confrontation was over. Whitmore was powerless, exposed, and finally, justice could begin. As the stranger led me out of the building, I felt a strange mix of exhaustion and relief. My life had been a labyrinth of lies, betrayal, and manipulation, but now, I had reclaimed it. I had faced the monster that had haunted my entire existence and emerged victorious. Standing in the cool night air, I whispered to myself, "I am Angela. I am free. And I will never be controlled again."